Hello, everybody. Welcome to With Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together to discuss the events and ideas that will shape our uncertain future. I'm your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. What is up?
Zach, who forgets to put his virtual background on all the time. There we go.
Whoops. No problem, man. How you doing?
Oh well. And lighting. There we go. Let there be light. I'm doing all right. I went out to the garden today to take a look, and as I kind of cleared a lot out, and I wanted to see what was left over and how it's doing. And it's all dying because it's that time of year, and so I can probably go
Tis the
pull the rest
season,
of.
bruh.
Yeah, I can go pull the rest of my pumpkins. I actually have like pumpkins lining the front door or front walkway to my apartment. Just like, whatever, man. I'm not gonna eat
Nice.
them all, and maybe somebody
Yeah,
will be like, "I'm gonna steal one and throw it in a car." Like, yeah,
because there's already been like a significant change in the weather, which is like fairly uncommon where we live.
hmm
Like it usually doesn't cool off and then have like overcast days with like a little rain, like fairly consistently.
yeah,
Like we never get that. Remember the campfire happened the first fucking like the 8th of November or something. So 3 weeks
yeah.
from now, it hadn't rained yet and it was still, 70, 80, 85 degrees during the day.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's really we're having a transition. I know I'm noticing like the leaves yellowing on the oak trees like right
Oh
now.
yeah.
When
Oh yeah.
like, I mean, I don't keep a phenology journal, so I can't actually definitively say that last year they started yellowing on this day.
True. True.
But I certainly pay attention and notice patterns, and it definitely feels like we didn't normally get like yellow leaves. We just got a abrupt color and leaf drop in like
hmm
mid-November to late November when it finally cooled off. But like we're actually transitioned out of the hot season like fairly smoothly to where like actually like plants are responding like I don't know,
Normal.
like we have seasons, which is fucking
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. I've got a lot of leaf drop right now in the backyard, which means a lot of raking to do. Oh well.
Yeah, and anybody watching from fucking New England or something, it's like you can hear like
That
the
happened months
Midwest or
ago.
something. He's like, what the fuck? We've been like, this is like normal shit. And we're just like, I don't know, just the leaves just fall off the tree while they're still fucking green in December sometimes.
Dude, what? No.
We don't really have like fall color. I mean, no, the sycamores give us fall colors. They'll give us reds and shit, but like you don't see a lot of autumn hues on a lot of trees. It's like the sycamore is like the only common tree, and then the chestnut, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, the Chinese chestnut. Um, Let's see. Okay, great. So you produced a lot of the show today.
Yeah.
I
It,
I
it, it
came
it
across
produced itself, I assure you.
yeah, it really did, which is kind of why we wanted to do it because this is a Monday stream, and we really had always intended Mondays to be like kind of like long form, focus on one thing, and have a more in depth discussion.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes hard to do. This guy advertised his shit to try and build his presence on YouTube, and I saw it, and I said, "Oh, that looks interesting. I'll click on that." And I
Yeah.
watched it and I was like, oh, we could spend an entire episode just debunking this dude,
We
or
can
at
turn
least
his
discussing, because he
yeah.
presents it, as you'll see, in a very reasonable way, but kind of draw some unreasonable conclusions. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that's true. Oh, I was just gonna say, he was also apparently like planning on running for mayor. I don't know if that was recently. I
In
didn't
San
take the time
Diego,
to look. Yeah, yeah,
I got a vibe he was a Southern California conservative.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yep. So,
they're a different breed than those fucking conservatives up here, bro.
there's a great video of someone else who, during a recorded meeting of like a governmental body, says he's or calls him on his bullshit and actually says bullshit. It's fucking fantastic. But anyway, so this guy is in charge. Carl DeMaio. He's associated with Reform California, which is just a group that wants to really not reform. Honestly, it's like go back. I mean, I guess that's reforming, but go back to a time when everybody was more rural and all that. And he really seems to hate cities, which I get that a lot from people who live in rural areas.
But
Like
doesn't he live in a city?
he does. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, go ahead, finish your thoughts. Sorry, bro.
I was gonna say, I often think that it, it, it's an unreasonable reaction to a reasonable slight, and the slight is you work to elect people, and then you don't get the things you want. And so, like, people in rural areas are often ignored because there are few voices, and it's easy to ignore them. So, I mean, I kind of get that complaint a bit.
Yeah, that's fair. Just based on
Yeah.
population. I mean, and that's kind of a central point, right? There's like utilitarianism is like a useful metric
The
for
most good for
determining
the
how to spend resources, right?
yeah, exactly. I actually have that in the notes. I'm like, you got to do the most good for the most people, my guy. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
but
pretty
yeah,
old idea, which like, in I think we've had this discussion, maybe not, I don't know. Could be seen as controversial, but I have, I'm not like approaching it from like a yeah, from a kind of authoritarian I should say I'm not approaching it from an insensitive space, but I think we've discussed this as far as ADA. It's like you got to do the most good for the most people. Like
yeah,
making every little nook and cranny of the city ADA accessible by putting sidewalks and curbs, like things like curbs that cross like at street grade and all the little yellow bumps, and installing new crosswalks so they beep at you, and they
right.
have other signals for people who have various kinds of audio visual disabilities and shit. It's like, no, just provide fucking public housing to those folks in places that like in neighborhoods that accommodate their needs, instead of trying to conform the whole city, which is a very, very expensive thing,
So, are you
into
recommending putting all of the disabled people into gulags? Because
no, no,
that's what
no.
I hear.
No, actually, I would consider giving them the most like public housing in the most prime, like downtown, prime
Yes.
real estate, and then make downtown that way so that the commercial center of the city can accommodate all kinds of people as it should, versus like let's go out to this weird suburb where like or like suburban corner of the city,
Right.
and you know, I guess people could live there and then come up to something, but like people don't walk in the suburbs. Like they don't.
Yeah.
It's inhospitable to pedestrians, and yet we like are forcing to spend astronomical amounts of money to make it like suitable for like the minority of fucking people who might ever use it.
Yeah. One of these days, we're going to have to talk about bike lanes in Fresno, but not today.
Not today, because we're talking instead about why some people, and I do think he speaks to a real
Oh, yeah.
concern,
Yeah.
because I've heard it from my parents, right?
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
we're being driven out. Newsom and the fucking liberals don't want people to live in the country anymore.
Yeah.
And that is
True to a point.
true to a point.
Yeah.
Um, but realistically, that's not what's happening.
Yeah. It's
I
just,
think I think policy changes, and I think that like, yeah.
well,
Um,
he has a great point, and when he says it, I'll point it out because it's
sure.
obvious if you think about it for even a
So
second.
you're in charge of the flow today. Take it away.
Go with the flow.
California politicians have declared war on rural communities in their state. Coming up, we'll tell you what they're trying to do to force people to leave rural communities and move to dense urban areas, and what we're doing to fight back.
Spoiler: what you're doing to fight back is liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell. He never
For his
talks about.
organization.
He never talks about it other than that.
I don't know. Yeah, if this is just kind of an attempt to build like a conservative radio or media empire, right? Like or presence and business, or if it's like legitimate. I thought Reform California was a response to the Cal exit. There was two separate like
Oh, gotcha.
competing kind of successionist movements that came from more kind of practical places where they're like, we're the fifth largest economy in the world and we are the largest state by population in the whole fucking union, and we're a fraction of the representation. We're a
Mhm.
majority of the taxes and a fraction of the fucking receive a fraction of the representation, right?
It almost sounds like you're saying we're being taxed and not being represented.
We are.
Last time that happened, didn't go well.
Well, Californians are fucking dumb, and most of them be like, we could never win in a war. It's like, then you don't fucking pay attention.
You don't know my friends.
You're not paying attention if you think. I mean, sure, we're not gonna like it's not gonna be over instantaneously, but like the United States military can't even build the alliances and manage the logistics of fucking waging a conventional ground war, let alone like fight off insurgencies, as they have shown they lose over and over and over and over and over again. We lost in Vietnam. We lost badly.
Yeah, we've lost every ground war since, if I recall correctly.
I guess you could kind of say we
Loss.
won in the Gulf War.
Yeah.
Because we achieved the political. I mean, I don't support American empire, but the United States met its objectives, I think, and I don't know a ton about it, but I think that they met their objective without what happened in the second Gulf War, right? The War on Terror Gulf War, where then we were like there and we're an occupier fighting an insurgency. Whereas before it was like we just beat back Saddam's army and humiliated him and then left.
Right. Yeah. That is true.
So I could see that you have, I believe they even said in the press that the first Gulf War broke the Vietnam syndrome or whatever. Like it made the American public okay with going to war again.
Yeah. It tried to play into the pride and everything. I mean, I remember there were like collectible cards of Gulf War, and it was like the Tomahawk missile and this tank and this firearm and these people and U.S. General so and so, and I'm like, okay. Now that I think about it and I'm older, I'm just like, that's so bad. You were basically selling the war to children, and we bought it.
He's got a more professional intro than us. We got to work on making a little intro.
I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California. And before you say there must be some conspiracy theory here, let's just show you the evidence and the receipts.
I worry that if you have to say that, there might already be a conspiracy theory going on. Nobody who's talking sane and logical has to preface everything with like, now before you judge me.
Yeah, and it was kind of, I mean, I'm not going to fucking trash the guy. He's clearly put together in terms of production value than we are. But it is funny that he's kind of like, there's a war on California, roll intro. And he's like, you're going to call it, some call it a conspiracy theory, but let's show you the receipts. That seems like something that should come before the intro. Right?
A little out of order.
There's a war on rural California. It may sound like a conspiracy, but we're going to show you the receipts. And then it goes into his like, yeah.
That would have been
anyway. At any rate, much love.
And a pattern that we're seeing in California of liberal politicians wanting to basically choke off rural communities and force people to have to move into dense urban areas. There's a pattern of policies that all are geared towards penalizing people who live in rural areas as though somehow you shouldn't be living out there. And instead, people should be in these.
Yeah.
Instead, people should be in these urban areas. He says that there's a pattern of this being something that the government has intended to do, and I don't
specifically libertarian or liberal politicians. Yes,
liberal politicians, right?
Yeah.
Which presumably is California because it's a one-party state, but like, as far as I know, I have yet to hear any politician be like, we're going to starve rural California of resources. In fact, rural California gets lots and lots and lots of resources, actually disproportionately more so, as far as I know. And I didn't pull up data for it, but I think it's very similar to, like in terms of counties, it's very similar. Like Californians as a state pays more money in taxes than it receives back in services from the federal government, right?
Correct.
Similarly, in California, higher income, like higher GDP counties and regions, multiple county regions, they pay a disproportionate amount of the taxes and receive back less than what you would their proportion of that. Like, and so they're basically subsidizing poor counties, just like California subsidizes poor states.
Correct. Yeah.
And when I say poor county, I mean, generally speaking, their rural counties are the poor counties.
Yeah, you don't have a very big tax base. It makes sense.
You're not a big tax base, and also like generally extractive industries, not a lot of like value added stuff, right? It's more
Yeah,
commodity export driven kind of stuff instead of like
and that
the
leads to my
person who imports the corn and makes the tortilla and sells it. Like we don't
yeah.
get that value added shit.
Well, and that leads to my point. And, he says it's liberal politicians choking off rural areas. Or is it that businesses like to be near coastlines where shipping is easy and where big cities are, so they have a large pool of labor to choose from?
They're closer to not just labor markets,
Yeah,
but also consumer markets.
exactly. And so I think he's confusing the cause of the effect that he sees. And because he's clearly trying to blame it on certain people. And it's like, if you zoom out a bit, I have a feeling it's got more to do with large business drawing our people to the areas that he's complaining about.
Yeah.
These dense urban areas. And it's quite remarkable when you take a look at all of the policies and how they all seem to have penalties for communities that are rural and incentives for communities that are dense urban. First, let me just start out with what they're trying to do with cutting off insurance in rural areas. We've seen insurance carriers, private insurance carriers, State Farm and Allstate, announce recently that they're leaving the state. They're making private decisions that it's no longer possible for them to financially make ends meet in the state by providing property insurance. And so they are deciding no new applications and they're going to be exiting the market. Now, state politicians should have reacted to this decision by saying, oh no, what can we do? Is there any way for us to fix the situation? But they didn't. And the reason why is that government has its own insurance program called the FAIR Plan.
So he basically says the government didn't do anything, and then, by the way, they did about 50 years ago. So contradicts himself within 5 seconds.
And under the FAIR Plan,
We-
you pay
So I just want to let this
a premium into the government insurance pool, and then they decide what properties would be covered. They decide what your premium amount would be, and they decide what replacement value would be for any sort of damage. This is a very
So is he saying that he's like, well, the government has a program where they think they're in charge and they're just denying insurance? That sounds like what he's saying.
Yeah, he's basically saying he acknowledges that like State Farm and the other one, I forget, Allstate or whatever, are
Allstate,
pulling
yeah.
out of California, and that they are doing so because of all these reasons, and then saying that but the government is also going to do that exact same thing. Which at my point, it's like, well, how is that any worse? And then,
Oh, okay.
There's a problem with that though, and that is the California Fair Plan, as you will shortly see. It is
Right.
fair. Oh, go ahead.
No, okay. So he kind of is basically saying the government has this plan and they're denying insurance when the reality is going to be exposed now.
Yeah, and I don't know that he says that they're denying it. I think he's saying that they get to lay down all the terms, the cost, the payouts, and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's what insurance does, government provided or privately. You all
Right.
have
Because the insurance is heavily regulated.
Yeah.
Private insurance is heavily regulated by the state.
And now his complaint about the fair plan and how it's the government gets to decide and so on and so forth is immediately laid bare as a lie when you read the first page of the California Fair Act at the California Department of Insurance. While created, and they're speaking of the Fair Plan, by the governor and legislature, the Fair Plan is a private association whose day-to-day operations are controlled by insurance companies, not taxpayers. So he's full of shit still. Like, it's great.
Well,
he made this so easy to get to.
Right. So he's kind of being like, well, there's this government agency that's like intentionally, they get to choose who gets insurance, and they're choosing not to insure rural people because they don't want people to live in the countryside. That is like the string of his argument, correct?
Yeah, that is his.
And then it's like, well, not exactly. This FAIR Plan was created due to a need for it 50 fucking years ago.
Yeah, it was.
And it's not actually the government that makes that decision. It's actually the insurance industry itself that decides what they're going to cover, how they're going to cover, how they're going to structure coverage.
And so what really sucks is that means that the big ones are going to leave because they have the power to do so, and it's going to be much smaller insurers who are going to foot the bill. The FAIR plan is very similar. It reminds me of like Obamacare, where it's supposed to be like an insurer of last resort.
Yeah.
And so, like, the insurance companies that are involved with this are going to get stuck with the majority of the bad stuff that occurs when people,
Yeah.
decide to live in rural
Smaller
areas.
smaller companies means less capitalization, means less ability to pay out on catastrophic fucking claims. Right.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the other thing that he didn't mention when he's like, oh, this insurance claims these are leaving. And I'm surprised he did not say, oh, they're leaving because of overregulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because most people were blaming, saying, oh, they're leaving because they're regulated too much. When in reality, I read a figure that the claims for the campfire, just in like property claims,
Mhm.
excuse me, and damages in the campfire area is $12 billion.
Yeah. That would put a lot of insurance companies out of business.
I mean,
Yeah.
even though there's a bunch of insurance companies represented there, right? At least
Yeah.
several. That's they weren't collecting fucking 12 billion. They probably haven't collected 12 billion in premiums in the last 40 years from Paradise.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like the thing is, right, and then that's not to mention insure like PG&E's insurer who had to pay out whatever hundreds of millions of dollars, or it was billions of dollars, wasn't it, in damages.
Yeah.
And so like they're just like, nope, fuck, nope.
Yeah.
We're not doing this.
Yeah.
And that's because insurance companies, like we were just saying, small insurance companies will go bankrupt, and then people won't get any claim
True. Yes.
after paying in a premium, because they have to pay a premium into a company that will never ever have the capitalization or the assets on hand to be able to pay out a catastrophic claim like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be court negotiated. You get less than you actually thought you would get, but that's all you get because that's all we have.
Right. Yeah. Because we've declared bankruptcy and are protecting a lot of our
and the
assets.
court is mediating how people get paid when it goes into bankruptcy.
Exactly.
And so it's like this guy's like, oh, they want to get rid of rural communities. It just happens that like a lot of the problems that have caused insurance lately are primarily in rural areas.
And that has several reasons. I mean, bad roads. You've got lack of infrastructure to fight fires, and so you're relying, as you well know, Steve. You've got fires that are relying upon water sources that are dozens of miles away, and you've got planes and helicopters.
And it all depends on a
Yep.
lot of factors, right? Exactly. And there's various states of disrepair, which I think he talks about for us later.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there on that. But it's just to say that like it's a bit hyperbolic to be like,
Yeah.
and kind of factually iffy, but like it presents, and that's kind of the thread that weaves today's show together, is that like you can sound really smart and well informed,
Right.
and also be your informedness is tainted by your fucking particular ideology.
Correct. Yeah.
And I will freely admit there are probably moments when my knowledge of things is tainted by my ideology, but I tend
it affects us all.
yeah, I'm willing to. I take a lot of positions that aren't welcome in my ideological circle because I have consistency and integrity.
So I noticed that he immediately, after the private industries pull out, he immediately says the government needs to do something. But then when I watch more of his videos, I did that for you folks. I watched more of this guy.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah, just to find out his stance on big government and taxation, and he is anti both. And so like he's like, the government should have stepped in. Oh, that government that you basically like neutered by or a pushing policy that said taxes are bullshit, and we shouldn't have government agencies like, I don't know, firefighters and stuff like that. Yeah, he's really talking out of both sides of his mouth. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I took him very much to be a kind of libertarian-esque type of person.
Yeah, that's
while also everything he says is like everything he points out throughout all of his arguments. Like there's an element of that like those things cost a lot of money and take a lot of tax dollars, and those tax dollars are coming from wealthier areas to these areas, and that's not happening anymore. or
Yeah.
it's happening less, or it's being restricted, or whatever. And that's his proof that they just don't want you to have the lifestyle that you have. They don't want you to be who you are. You're from the country, and it's part of your identity, and they're attacking your identity. It's fucking insidious, and he presents it really well.
Yeah. and he talks about how, the government, running anything like that is dangerous, but gives no explanation for why. Doesn't point out like historical failures of government run insurance policies or anything like that. No facts, just fluff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, that should be like Fox News's platform motto.
Very dangerous situation to have a government-run insurance program, but it actually raises a bigger risk. What if government simply decides we no longer are going to insure in the following rural areas? That is absolutely the risk that you have when government gets to make the policies. And we see that the cost of insurance in rural areas is astronomically higher than other areas of the state. Now, you'll get told by the media and the politicians that the reason why insurance is so much higher in rural areas is that there's more damage to property. Well, that's actually not true. We have not seen higher amounts of losses and damage from rural areas. It is true that there is a higher risk for potential flooding or wildland fire damage. But in terms of the actual damage in those areas, we're not seeing a higher profile, a higher set of losses. We also know that it's the government that has failed to do what's necessary to fight back against some of those issues. The flood.
So I will say, after watching a few more of his videos, this guy loves private industry, and yet, he does, when that fails and the government doesn't live up to his estimation, he holds the government to a higher standard than he did those private interests that abandoned the people that he thinks are being abandoned. It's very, very disingenuous.
Yeah, I think also that kind of like there are no greater losses in rural areas than urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had a huge earthquake in a while. We'll find that that'll change.
Yeah.
However, a lot of those losses are not private losses. They're like freeway. I mean, there are a lot of private losses, but it's like freeway collapses and broken water pipes and shit like that. It's very expensive. Governments, municipalities, the state government has insurance, right? It's a whole big thing. We're just balancing and risk and shuffling risk around to try and make it hurt the least we can financially, right? That's all we do.
Yeah.
That's all insurance is.
Yep.
Shuffling risk around.
And I feel bad because I made a note for myself to research his claim about it being, less expensive in rural areas, and I failed to do that. Very sad.
No, but the reality is that like urban areas, there are more people. Therefore, if you look geographically, like if we could punch into a GIS all this data, we just had it and we can summon it at a snap of a finger. We could show a map where it shows like the amount of money paid into insurance premiums, and it's going to be darker where all the fucking people live.
Yeah,
but the thing is that like generally speaking, like even in all that flooding that happened like this last year, like what are the claims on that? A few thousand houses, maybe 10,000 automobiles, right?
Yeah,
maybe a couple. There's a handful of life insurance policies potentially.
Yeah,
right. If they were insured, right? Like a lot of people, like you don't fucking insure your car for being swept away in a flash flood, right? Like
no, and you're right. It definitely tore up infrastructure more than it tore up
infrastructure more than private claims. But the Camp Fire and the Tubbs Fire in back-to-back years in California wiped out some. It was 35,000 fucking housing units. Like that's not fucking comparable.
Right.
Like it's the amount of claims, or like when you see somebody's like oceanside fucking house landslide into the ocean, you're like, yeah, but that's one fucking house. Right? It's not an entire city being wiped off the map.
Yeah, absolutely true.
And so to say, without the data, we can't say definitively, but he didn't provide the data either.
Yeah.
The burden of proof is on him as far as that's like to take that claim serious, especially knowing just general figures from experience and understanding, the situation.
And just thinking about it for even a few seconds.
Yeah, we could push back on it without much effort because we know it's probably wrong, and it's the burden of proof is on him to be like, here are the numbers to show that.
And that is very common throughout this video and a lot of the other videos. They have no references for you. We include references in the show notes, so you can look it up for yourself.
Yeah.
We do not bullshit. We make sure that you can.
We do our best, right?
You can duplicate our research if you want to for yourself. Find out where we got it. Our claims are based in something at least.
Right.
Carrying on.
Yeah, you
Flooding
can fact check.
projects,
the flooding challenge opinions anyway, but
yeah, that's true.
But even though in those opinions, you can approach them with your own kind of philosophical argumentation and engage with it in a meaningful way, but not if you're just this guy where you're like, oh, it's like, well, of course, like California is against rural people because they're against rural people, right? It's fucking circular logic, right? And then all of his claims, he's trying to fit into and leaving things out that would make people question his connection of facts to his conclusion.
Yeah. And I was delighted at how easy it was. Yet it did take time.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I was delighted at how easy it was to look things up. Like later on he gives article images and you can just search the thing and you get it right there. But it is time consuming, and it reminds me of the statement that like bullshit takes no time to make, but debunking it takes forever, or something along those lines. Yeah. Like, so much energy.
Well, and I think that's why to go off way on another tangent, but somewhat related to that.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about why the left is so fucking impotent,
mm-hmm.
and the right has so much fucking power in this country, even though they're constantly like, we don't have any power.
Right. We can't do anything.
The fucking control almost every institution.
Yeah.
Especially at the local level. Like, our governments aren't controlled by fucking socialists.
Yeah.
Like, how many elected socialists and communists are there in the United States? Like 8 or 10? The Green Party, I don't even think has anybody. Like, I think there might be 1 or 2 in state office, and then most everybody else that's a Green that's elected is in a fucking nonpartisan office. So Green isn't next to their name, so no one knows, right?
That's how they get you.
Yeah, but the reality is this guy's fucking. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a fucking trip. It's a fucking trip.
Absolutely is. Continuing though.
Okay.
Challenges can be lessened if government would simply improve our water infrastructure, raising reservoir levels, as well as lining canals and doing other sorts of investments, but they chose not to do that. We also know that they've been.
Yeah.
Was he talking about like controlling floodwaters?
He's talking about, I wanted to let you absorb it first because I've already made all my comments. But yes, he's absolutely talking about avoiding floods by diverting more of the water to reservoirs and lining the canals. One presumes with concrete. He does not expand upon the concept.
How would lining a canal takes water out of a natural channel and moves it somewhere?
Yeah. So
how would lining the canal make flooding less bad?
So basically,
it would make it worse if you fucking make it impermeable.
My understanding of his understanding is that if you line the canal, then the water moves faster to the ocean and gets wasted, which he is against, as we will soon see. But yeah, that seems to be the logic: is you should just make it so that the water gets from where it goes to where it ends as fast as possible, with the exception of filling reservoirs, which is just talking points that you see every time you drive on the fucking highway in California and you pass near a farm.
Yeah, and also like the logic on that doesn't check either, in the sense that like, regardless, the raising the dam doesn't fucking help because they still have to let water out, as we saw when the Oroville Dam almost fucking collapsed.
Exactly.
But all of that infrastructure he's talking about, see, they're just denying the necessary infrastructure to rural people. It's like, well, that's part of the point, dude. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason that like the government is de-incentivizing, and I could say there is a little bit of truth in his argument that they are incentivizing density and de-incentivizing non-density or whatever. dispersion.
Yeah.
I think that there is a degree of truth to that. I don't think it's to attack rural values, which is kind of like the subtext of all of this shit.
Right. Oh, it's
which is really cliche at this fucking point.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
But in his examination of how like the evil government is trying to hurt conservatives, which is the core, the narrative thread of his fucking video.
Yeah.
He's kind of showing why the fucking state government has been disincentivizing dispersal and incentivizing density. Because like all of that infrastructure you're talking about is fucking expensive. And ensuring homes, lots of homes in areas that are prone to disaster is very expensive.
It is much cheaper to let places that have historically been floodplains be floodplains, allow them to disperse the water like, they want the population to disperse instead of concentrating it like they do not want the population to do. You see how I did that? I linked the water and the population. I thought that was pretty good.
I like it. Let's roll.
Been neglecting common sense wildland fire management practices to thin the forests. The environmental groups don't want to see any sort of thinning of forests, and so the risk profile is greater. The approach has been to use the threat of natural disasters to try to claim that it's dangerous to even build or continue to live in rural communities when we're not.
Yeah.
So that's kind of his conclusion of, or summary of the point he's trying to make, which the data doesn't support. Right. Again, he says, and draws out these kind of cliche conservative tropes. It's the environmentalist. I have seen more publicly funded fuel reduction projects on public lands now than I've seen in my life, because the state finally got fucking hip to the need to do it. It wasn't because of environmentalists. It was money. They weren't spending enough money to do it because it's not profitable for the fucking logging company to clean the slash.
Yeah.
They generally pile it and burn it. Yeah. But then all of the non-marketable timber that grows all over the fucking forest, like the ones that are skinny sticks that die due to shade or disease or insect pressure or whatever, its natural existence as a fucking forest ecosystem.
Right.
Like those little things that die, the logging companies don't have to clear any of that out, even though nature is producing it.
I knew I could rely on you to talk about forestry. I put a note for myself. I was like, let Steve do his thing.
Let Steve do his thing. But the thing is that it's not the state of California and environmentalists that are preventing it. In fact, most of the fuel reduction projects I know of, like that I've been involved in, are led either directly by indigenous people or other fucking environmental organizations. Environmental organizations are the ones doing the fucking fuel reduction because they're the ones that want a healthy fucking forest. And they understand that those fuels need to come out or be reduced in a controlled manner so we can restore cultural fire. Environmental groups are doing that thinning, and the state of California has started providing grants to groups to do that stuff. Where the fuel reduction doesn't take place is on private fucking timberland. Because we are not allowed to go on private timberland unless we make an agreement with every fucking private timberland owner.
Which we should.
And do that work. And moreover, it's private fucking land. It's not to the public benefit. Why would we spend our resources on your shit, improving your shit? Fuck you. And the fact of the matter is that of all the land that's burned, most of it's either private or federal. So anybody that keeps coming after the state, fuck California, fuck the Democrats, and fuck all that shit. But guess one thing they're not doing? One thing they're not doing is fucking neglecting to manage our forests. Like, we're doing the fucking best we can in the context. Like, and realistically, most of the forest land in the state of California is the federal government's, not California's. And most of the fires are burning on federal land or private land. There was no managing the fuel loads in Paradise without doing what they finally did, which was, again, to his point, reducing fuels. They put that burden on private landowners like my parents who were uniquely available in their economic security to be able to put out 40 fucking grand to have the work done to meet the requirements of CAL FIRE and PG&E.
Yeah.
40 fucking grand. They have 2.5 acres. They
Yep.
spent 40 fucking grand cutting trees and removing debris. And so most people can't afford that. And if you can't afford it, the counties start under Cal Fire, they start fucking fining you.
Yep. And then you can't afford
And
it further.
It's literally forcing people to do fuels reduction on private property is driving people out. And then you might say, well, you shouldn't force people to do on private property. Well, then you're gonna burn through, and then you shouldn't be insured. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's the end. We've talked before about nth order effects. Remember that conversation?
Yeah.
It's first, second, third removed, 10th removed, 20th removed. There are all sorts of moving parts. And like, you cannot say environmentalists don't want to do fuel reduction, even though like I literally have driven by a half a dozen fucking fuel reduction sites, most of them indigenous led.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Like, so go ahead.
And I was going to say, and relying upon the individuals, the private, landowners, small time landowners, sorry, not like forestry, to reduce the load is a lot like relying upon the individuals to reduce their water usage when the bulk of the water usage is used for industry. Like nothing that we do is going to make much of a difference. And it's the same for, individuals like your parents. Like, yeah, it'll save them, but it's not going to stop a forest fire. Like, the problem is so much bigger. It's a drop in the bucket or a tree in the forest, as it were.
Yeah, realistically, we would have to build managed perimeters.
Yeah.
Do cultural burning because it's the only way to economically manage that much fucking land. Like, I've done forest work. We've had 4 teams of 3, so 12 individuals, mostly actively engaged for a day and a half to do like 2 acres.
Maybe
if we were all getting paid $20 an hour, and you had to pay payroll taxes, and you had to insure us and provide us meals and lodging and all that stuff to go out in the fucking woods and do that shit, it would be astronomically expensive. That's why nonprofits and tribes do it.
Yeah, I was going to say there should be nonprofits that basically like coordinate homeowners that need help with that, with businesses that need the lumber.
Yeah, and some of it's that, but again, like I said, part of a lot of the when we talk about fuels reduction, we're talking about getting all the stuff out of the forest that isn't marketable. Because if it's a valuable tree,
that's true. Yeah,
the market will remove that tree.
That's right. True. And isn't the rule of thumb like you got to get like 10 feet up or something like that, all the ladder fuel?
Yeah, to limb. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you have to get rid of like any kind of like large twiggy stuff, and ultimately you have to occasionally burn down the duff. So if a fire does start and gets in there, there's not a lot of fuel, so the fire can burn through relatively quickly. There's not a lot of stuff to get it up into the tree because it's the resins and the oils and the leaves and shit that like, once it starts in the canopy, it flies.
Yeah.
And like the trees it'll get so fucking hot through an area that the trees look like the water content in the fucking tree vaporizes and the fucking trees explode.
Yeah,
it's fucking crazy.
That was something I learned recently was that it's the volatiles inside the tree that are burning, and it's not actually like the wood. The cellulose itself is not the first thing to burn. It eventually burns, but it's not the thing that starts it. Yeah, but it's not the thing that gets it going.
It's all like basically hydrocarbons, right? Like it's fucking carbohydrate, like in the sugars and shit like that, and other kinds of less dense, right, flammable materials.
Yeah.
The leaves and the small diameter stuff, it'll just fucking move through the canopy. Oof. There's not a lot you can do, so you have to plan for that, but that costs money. The governments would have to invest in that, and that's the thing, is that rural people, and he's kind of you've mentioned that he's kind of an anti-tax person, and the whole thing, when I walked away from this whole video, I'm like, right, but like rural people don't like fucking paying taxes, and then they're like, but I want to live here with all the conveniences and luxuries that people get when they pay taxes.
I'm glad
I don't want to pay taxes.
I'm glad you said it, not me. Basically, we're subsidizing people getting to live, like these idyllic lives off in the forest and all that stuff. Well, the rest of us have to live.
Just like meth heads and fucking drunks.
And the fucking rest of us have to live in shit cities.
For real,
I mean, true. But, the rest of us have to live in like, shitty cities while everyone else.
Yeah, with heroin junkies, right?
Yeah. They're like, look at this
the mentally ill.
Yeah.
We get heroin junkies and the mentally ill. You can have the tweakers and the drunks.
Yeah. Anyway, carrying on.
We're not seeing that data or evidence. We also know that government has cut off infrastructure from rural areas.
Everywhere.
I mentioned water. The water policy in the state of California has penalized rural communities by saying we're just simply not going to give you any more water deliveries, or we're going to dramatically cut back on your water supply.
They never, ever, ever denied water somewhere.
Okay.
Like water, the old adage, whiskey is for drinking, water's for fighting over.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, if they tried to cut off an entire community of fucking water,
Mm-hmm.
like there would be a fucking rebellion.
Yeah, yeah. And that leads me to wonder what he means by cutting off. Like, is it like that housing or a project that we talked about a while ago, near Fresno, where they just ran the wells dry? Is that denying them water in his mind? I don't know anymore because he's impossible to follow his thoughts. But yeah, I do not believe that.
I think
what
he
he's
uses
speaking
some
of-
leaps of logic to say like political grandstanding and feet dragging on things like the Sites Reservoir are denying people water. But as we've known until this last year, most of our really, really big reservoirs like Oroville and Shasta, they were pretty much fucking empty for the last 3 fucking years.
Yeah.
So I don't know how building another empty bathtub is going to be in making water appear, because that's the thing. Is we can't just create water.
Yeah. Well, and that's
our water storage doesn't do enough.
And anyone who lives along the 99 or anywhere near it will know that there's all those signs that are like build more dams, and it's like it's exactly like you're saying. Building a dam does no good if there's no water to fill it. You're just wasting a lot of money making a nice big empty pool. And so,
in 95% of California's hydrology has been drastically changed from its original natural state for human use. 95 fucking percent.
You've had dozens of feet of subsidence in the San Joaquin Valley, like dozens of feet.
And that's groundwater, and that I think is what he's talking about. What he's talking about is forcing some people to abandon certain wells in certain areas due to the fact that what you do on your private property, you fucking like naively fucking puritanical ideologue in this libertarian fantasy where like what you do on private property is somehow sacred, and as long as you don't affect other people, well, you are affecting other people by subsidence, and fuck other people, you're destroying the aquifer.
Yeah, when you're making it so it can never be filled again.
Cavities that held water that will no longer ever hold water. So parts of Fresno, like where you live, there used to be fucking trees there.
Yeah.
There are not trees because of groundwater discharge, too much drawing of groundwater, and land subsidence.
Yup.
And you will never get fucking trees in a whole. It's just a fucking now going to just be an arid steppe, arid plateau or whatever. Like, it's not going to host the riparian communities it did before because of fucking agriculture drawing too much water.
Yeah,
and that does
irreversible.
That does not stay contained. It's the straw in the milkshake thing. Drainage, my boy. Right? Like, you can do on this land, it'll affect over there, because like the fact is that private property lines mean fucking nothing when it comes to geology and ecology and hydrology.
That's correct. Yeah. The aquifer doesn't care, who owns the land above it. It's going to sink no matter what if you drain it too far.
Yeah, this is going to take us fucking forever to get
it is. It is. We'll get through it. We will get through it. You'll see. Why does it keep doing that?
When in fact, the water shortage is a man-made shortage through water law and water policy. Half of our water, 55% actually of our water each year, is mandated to flow out to the ocean and get wasted. Only
I just wanted to pause right there. I'm going to let him. I'm going to redo it. Let him finish up his stats, and then we're going to look at that and where he got it from and how he altered the word subtly to make it fit his messaging.
5% of our water goes for human consumption, and the remainder, about 40%, goes for agriculture.
All right, so he says...
Wait. Can you let him finish? Because he says something right after this.
Okay.
That water supply has been cut off from the agricultural areas and rural areas by state politicians.
Okay.
There you go. Go ahead with your thought.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know. Every time he stated something as fact, I was immediately like, is that a fact? Let me see.
No, that's about right in terms of the water use, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is right, but his subtle usage of words is what I think matters the most. Communities use 10%, agriculture uses 40%, and the environment, according to the Public Policy Institute of California, the environment uses 50%. He says 50% of it goes to the oceans. That's not accurate. And by the way, if a river doesn't make it to the ocean, it's no longer a river. It's just some water. I don't know what it is, but it's not a river anymore. A river has to terminate in
Inland
an
lake,
ocean
probably.
or a lake. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
got to go to an ocean or a lake.
basin.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just like, yep. Oh, there you go. A basin.
Well,
The Colorado River basin, because that doesn't make it to the ocean most days.
yeah, and I think we were talking about this yesterday when we were doing like pre-production. It's like the Colorado River goes to Mexico, so we don't give a fuck about the environment.
Yeah.
But guess what? All that water that's allowed to be wasted in the ocean is actually flushing
The salt.
the second largest freshwater estuary in the United States.
Mhm.
It's a biodiversity hotspot. It also, the fucking Delta supports fishermen, hunters, the whole Pacific flyway. So entire communities of fucking birds, right? And also farmers who live, own land in the Delta. They fucking have islands and shit and they farm them.
There's something else very important that a river making it to the ocean does, and that is it holds the ocean back. If a river doesn't make it anymore, you get seawater intrusion into the aquifer,
and it starts fucking killing fish or changing their
Migrations.
habitats and the plant communities and everything.
Yeah, and it makes it so that the water that he's so concerned about is unavailable for us because it gets contaminated.
It seeps into groundwater.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is like, he's talking about, and they're trying to cut off that 40% of water that goes to farmers, and those are rural communities. Like you just admitted, rural communities use 40%, urban communities use 10%, and 50% is left to not be taken. And it is taken, right? We still shit in it. There's a lot of other things we do with the water, but the fact that he can be like, we took half and that's not enough, like, is absurd, right?
Yeah.
It's just absolutely absurd that we can't fucking decide as a people that we want ecosystems to function. And as we just laid out, there are dozens and dozens of nth order effects that water is needed to prevent, right?
Yeah.
Including saltwater infiltration of freshwater wells, like et cetera, right?
So
and
the
so
bread
just,
oh, go ahead.
What's that?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it's absurd, and you can kind of see him stumble for a second there, and he's like, "Oh, and there's 40% of it goes to agriculture," and they're trying to stop that. They're not trying to stop it, really. They will never stop it because the fucking big agricultural lobby is one of the most powerful fucking political interest groups in the state.
Yeah.
I would say it has more power than big tech, because big tech focuses a lot of its lobbying efforts on the federal government.
Yeah.
But like landlords and fucking big ag are like what basically controls the state government.
Yeah.
Just as big pharma and the military industrial complex controls the fucking federal government, right? Like,
right.
That's our own local thing, right? Yeah, it's just so absurd. And also like he kind of almost contradicts himself. And like he's claiming they're trying to get rid. No, what they're doing is the policy that passed 10 years ago was after many, many, many years of drought where like more storage wouldn't have fucking fixed it, right?
Yeah.
And what we decided to do is like, hey, we really need to start understanding groundwater better to manage it as a long-term storage of water, especially in the shallow aquifers that can recharge, right? And so they started requiring monitoring, well monitoring.
Right.
So now farmers they kind of have to share how much they pull out. And we started saying like, hey, we need to set quotas. We need to establish some kind of firm limit on what we can take out of the ground.
Yeah. And you need to figure out ways to use the water.
Away from anybody.
No, it's just asking them to use it more efficiently.
Yeah, and it's also ensuring that like all the big corporate farms that can get the fucking the financing, the loans, because they have more capital or whatever, and can stick a bigger straw in the ground, they don't fucking run the 100-foot well of the smaller farmer dry.
And
So there's some
corporations.
equity in that too between larger firms and smaller firms, which I think is a valid function of government. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and corporations are why I brought up this map. This is the breadbasket of California, arguably the breadbasket of this whole country. And much of it runs through with highways and freeways, and much of the green spots you see are corporate owned. And they are not actually all that rural. Like, these people are not hundreds of miles from the nearest thing. Like, where I live, you have massive farms that are like, within a half an hour of a Target or a Costco or whatever it is that you value the most. So, like, you've got all this area out here, and this is relatively close to nice things. I would not consider it to be all that rural. I consider rural to be out here in the fucking mountains and in these deadlands, where it's just trees. That's rural. That take hours to get to, from anywhere. The average farmer is not all that rural anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Back to our boy.
All right, moving on to the next point he makes.
Yep.
Choking again the rural community. We've also seen other forms of infrastructure not put into rural communities, most importantly, roads. As more people move into suburban areas and rural areas, we need more road capacity to get out there because people are commuting to and from centers of jobs.
Pause there. There is also a failure, and he is correct in this statement, although he certainly wouldn't say it. I guarantee he wouldn't say this. But there is a failure of government to provide affordable housing where people have jobs,
right?
So they don't have to drive an hour to get to work.
Yes, and I was going to say that there he is, talking about how like, oh well, our people have to drive in order to get to their jobs, and it's like, okay, so again we're back to the like ye privileged few who get to live in nicer, less densely populated areas, who are relying upon the taxation of the rest of us living in squalor in slums inside of cities.
Yeah,
like,
and we don't really have. I don't think we really have time because we're already at an hour and we still have a lot of this video left. And so we'll try and finish up maybe in another half hour.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to bring up the map, but if you brought up the map, you could show a city like Stockton, which is a city, and the South Bay, right? San Jose, Palo Alto, Fremont, Hayward kind of thing, right? People live inland in places like where you grew up, right?
Yeah.
And commute an hour and a half, 2 hours in the Bay Area
easily.
Those are not crowded roads. They built fucking freeways to accommodate long commutes.
They made the BART so that people could take that instead of driving the entire way. Yeah,
right. They extended mass transit out, plus widen the highway. I think that's at least 4 lanes through most of that.
Oh yeah. The Altamont
maybe 6 lanes through big chunks of it.
I think the Altamont
80 is like
6
lanes from Sacramento all the way to fucking Berkeley or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. We carved big ass roads into big ass mountains to make sure that people could get to their shitty jobs in the city.
Yeah, and at what cost? Well, a lot of costs. It would be difficult to kind of pencil all those and add them all up. But yet again, he's kind of drawing attention to a single fucking incident in a rural part of San Diego County where people probably, well, there's like some kind of exclusive, wealthier development, maybe a golf course, and people are like, I want to live up there and have this really nice existence where I don't have to deal with as many brown people and poor people, right?
Yeah.
But I want to be able to drive into where all the amenities are and all the infrastructure is. So build me some infrastructure. And they're just like, no, dude, fucking have a house closer to fucking where shit is. So,
hey, in my opinion, if you want to live out in rural areas, treat yourself like an old school settler. Live by your own means. Find your own water,
Yeah, no, like Forest Hill Bridge. I mean, that was built for other reasons, but like that was a massive fucking project that cost tens of millions of dollars way back in the day just to accommodate a bedroom community.
Yeah. A few thousand people living in the mountains.
Yeah. Like 2,500 people. And they spent tens and tens of millions of dollars to build a bridge.
And that is evidence of the political influence of the old.
Right. Of land developers.
Yeah. Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
Because usually it's politicians. In fact, I'm not going to go into the details, but that particular bridge and dam and other things were actually a whole real estate development scandal. It's fucking crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, you get government monies to build big infrastructure. They're trying to do it here. They approved this 300-acre subdivision bullshit on the edge of town. They gathered enough votes to do a referendum, and so the whole city gets to, all the voters get to say yes or no if they want this huge development, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
To be able to like have a democratic process to reject 300 acres of further sprawl, just so happens to be literally on ground that was burned during the campfire. Because the campfire burned right up to the edge of town through there. And they're going to build it right there. And so it's like, okay, you're going to build it where we actually know we've had wildfires. Like that doesn't make fucking sense. Okay. And then at any rate, they were like, the city applied for this fucking grant to widen this road because it was near like affordable housing, because like a quarter mile up the road, they had given land to a developer, a nonprofit developer that builds like fucking apartments for like old people and shit, like 65 plus or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to expand this road. And there's like, so it meets the criteria of the state of California for density, because here is this apartment complex for old people we just built that's like subsidized housing and like assistive living or whatever. Like they have staff on hand to help with like medical issues and shit. Right.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, we meet this requirement. But really what they were doing was trying to get state taxpayers to front the bill for the road, that without that road, they could not build that development. Yeah. And the developer, if they wanted to build the development, would have to build the road. Yes. And so they finagle it to try and get the public to pay for the infrastructure so the developer can profit. And it was that way with it was that way with the Auburn Dam and the Forest Hill Bridge, which is why the Forest Hill Bridge was ultimately installed, because they planned to build a dam which would have flooded out the old roads we used to go down the canyon and back up. They built the bridge, and they actually, I think, had to re-engineer the bridge at one point because it was never designed to be freestanding like that for very long. Like it was meant, like the columns were supposed to be supported by fucking being submerged, and they had to like go in and do some re-engineering to like kind of anchor it better or whatever. I don't remember the details of it, but like they had to make some design changes because it was designed for being a bridge across the lake.
Yeah. The buoyancy of the water to provide some support.
Exactly. Even the pressure lower on the columns kind of
help squeezing
hold it steady and shit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so it's just like it's land speculation.
Yeah.
A lot of big infrastructure, and that's probably what that was. Well, they were going to do this, and so these developers bought all this land, but until that's a 4-lane highway, like this land isn't very valuable.
Yeah.
And I didn't look into it, but I think you did.
I did. I tried on that one. It's hard. Anyway, moving on.
But the politicians have said, we don't want to put money into roads. Instead, we're going to put money into dense urban transit systems. More on that in just a moment.
Said no one who lives in a city ever. But I'll let
I'm just curious because like I live in a fucking town that has like an urban core. It's the largest city around. Right? We're surrounded by farms, right? And we have a fucking ton of money coming to expand roads, build overpasses, repair roads, right?
Yep.
Add additional stoplights. They put a stoplight up the street from my house. So that's all spending on roads. They haven't spent a goddamn dime on public transit.
Right. And this statement of all of them, I'm just like, wow. This is either like you've never been to a city and you just have a caricature of it in your mind.
I think so.
Like I think it's like he thinks that, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a history. It's like a documentary of how things actually are in big cities. Because the biggest complaint that I hear most people who live in a big city have is I have to drive everywhere. It costs a fortune, but public transportation sucks. And he later talks about, like bicycles and walking and how, like everybody would, they want everyone to walk or bike. And it's like, dude, if you've walked or biked in most of these areas, you know that they were designed to be hostile to pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And like right now are going through a whole bunch of pressure to be more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And like, but it's
and
lots of work.
did a fucking super quick search. Unfortunately, I didn't put in a search bar, and I don't fucking Edge uses fucking Bing as the default. But this doesn't have a year on it, but it popped up with something like about 60% is spent on highways, another 15% on local streets and roads, and then like 10% on public transit, and the rest on planning, administration, and other.
Yeah.
So local streets, roads, and highways is 85% from what I'm looking at in just like a quick Google search.
Yeah.
So we spent 85% of it on automobile infrastructure, and he's like, they just spend it all on mass transit in their big uppity cities.
We fucking wish.
It's fucking absurd, and it just defies like a simple fucking look at the state budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, go ahead.
In terms of where they're telling people to build houses. But in San Diego County, for example, Highway 67 is a rural highway that goes all the way from East County in the south all the way up to North County. And that 2-lane highway has been promised to receive an expansion to a 4-lane highway for the past 60 years. The population in Ramona, for example, California, which is in the northern eastern portion of San Diego County, it has tripled since 1988. But in 1988, Ramona was promised 4 lanes in exchange for them enacting and supporting a tax increase. In 2004, Ramona was once again promised 4 lanes in exchange for a tax increase. You see the pattern here? Fast forward to 2023, the Regional Transportation Agency, SANDAG, announces they're going to cut the 4-lane projects and that no investment will be made. Now, what those planners, the government planners, say is that people shouldn't be moving to Ramona anyway. They should just decide to sell and move closer to their urban areas. So by choking off water, by choking off road infrastructure, what the politicians are doing is saying, you're not supposed to live there. We're putting infrastructure dollars in the dense core urban areas. Third, they're now mandating that you not build in the rural areas. They're making it very restrictive to build housing in rural areas, while they're suing cities and jurisdictions for not building enough housing in the urban areas. Now, you've heard politicians in California do their press conferences saying, we need more housing, we need more housing, we're falling behind on housing.
Yeah. I looked up Highway 67.
So did I just now.
Yeah, it's slated for a lot of improvements, including a lot.
It also is mostly 4 lanes already.
Yeah, and it
just
is
looking
also,
at Google Earth.
Yeah, and it is also rural, which means it shouldn't have all that much traffic.
Fairly.
But yes,
I mean,
they're adding in a lot.
It looks like a fairly large city, though.
Yeah, and it says that they are currently, are looking at a highway improvement project for it. Things such as 2-way left turn lanes, turn pockets, standardized minimum sizes of shoulders, more turnouts for vehicles. That's the main complaint on a 2-lane highway is like, oh, I'm stuck behind a truck or fucking a tractor or whatever, and it's going to take me a half an hour, to get around it. Like, yeah, so that can be solved with a few turnouts here and there. And so, like, they're working or whatever. Yeah, they're working on it. It says here they're going to do center line concrete barriers in order to stop head-on collisions. Like, it's being worked on. And
yeah, and it also, from what I just gathered, just by scanning 67 from Escondido to fucking or what is that? Yeah, from Eucalyptus Hills to Ramona, El Cajon. Yeah, we know someone in El Cajon. Yeah, like scanning that piece of road, it's mostly actually 4 lanes, and the part that it's only 2 lanes looks like it's through a fairly narrow, so it's going to be an engineering challenge.
Right.
Like they're probably going to have to put the southbound lanes like up on one ridge and then the northbound lanes on another plane, because like they simply can't fit like just cut through and add a couple lanes. Like they're going to have to like so just technically
Yeah.
Like in terms of the engineering that goes into a project like that, the land acquisition, the attorneys, the fucking all the hearings that have to be given, all of that stuff, the initial design, the middle design, the final design,
Yeah.
all that stuff, plus then funding. How are we going to phase it? Like that shit takes fucking like decades and decades. And you can say, well, they were promised it would be done, and so they agreed to a tax increase. We agreed to a tax increase in California, or in the city of Chico, of 1% sales tax.
Mhm.
We have like of absolute majority, it's 6 conservatives and 1 fucking liberal, right? On our city council. 6 conservatives, 1 liberal, right? They're the ones that pushed to get the sales tax approved. When the sales tax approved, which a lot of people didn't want because it had no fucking earmarks in the words of the legislation, right? In the words of the ordinance we were passing. But people are like, I'm sick of potholes. I'm
Yeah.
sick of fucking loose shoulders. I'm sick of like this one place where like the vegetation's never cleared off, or this one place that like has a ton of bike traffic, but the bike lane isn't clearly marked and it's not wide enough, right? And so they're
Yeah.
going to make fucking improvements, and we passed the bill. Half of the money went to roads and the other half went to fucking cops,
Of course. Yeah.
which
mean,
is what they do
cops
with
are part
all
of
of
it.
our fucking resources. So we
Yeah.
spend half of it on fucking cops.
Yep. Yep.
So like homie needs to check it. Oh, they passed a bill. Did they pass a funding says that we're only going to pay taxes that go into a fund that is restricted by law to only be used to widen this road? Or did they
Yep.
say, oh, they're promising us roads, we'll raise this tax? Because that's how all fucking politicians operate. They'll do what the fuck they want because they look at the actual cost of the roads and they're like, we can't do all of this year. We can't do all of it any year. And that's why we're at this point where we've built out so much infrastructure, and the ability to maintain that infrastructure while also expanding infrastructure like is an impossibility, or increasingly an impossibility.
Right. Yeah.
This
And
is what overshoot looks like. Go ahead.
oh, that's a great word. I was going to say it all boils down to the greatest good for the greatest number. And he's basically saying like, oh yeah, we've got these towns out in the middle of nowhere that are getting bigger, and we're not improving the roads. And it's like they might be getting bigger, but they still don't even amount to like a Chico, which is not even a huge town. It's like 75,000. Like
Yeah.
it's not a priority. It's not
I
our
think
fault
he
you
also
choose to
relies
live.
on ignorance.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't going to do the homework. And in reality, most public transit systems are established as entities, usually
Mhm.
legal entities that have like parallel powers with like governments, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes they're across counties or whatever else, like they're regional. And so they connect a bunch of municipalities. So they're really coordination groups, right? And most of the time, they are legally empowered to borrow money. So voters can say, yes, I will put a bond on my property taxes to pay the local transit agency to expand the line and add more stops in this area or whatever, right? That's not, I mean, there can be money coming out of general funds, but as I gave you quick fucking math, it's usually like 10% goes
Mhm.
to actually like to mass transit. We usually most of that's spent on fucking buses, not on fucking trains, right? Or light rails or whatever.
Yeah, or anything substantial.
Yeah, and so it's just disingenuous to be like they're not improving the road and they taxed them and then they're not doing the thing. And it's like when in reality a mass transit organization would probably issue its own bonds and borrow money to do most of what it does.
Yep. Yep. That is absolutely true. Uh, moving on though.
Cuckoo.
It's true. We've fallen behind on housing, and we have a separate podcast on the reasons why government is to blame for the
Oh,
failure
government.
of the market building housing. But while they say we need more housing, they're literally banning and choking off the housing if it's in the wrong area in their estimation. The wrong area is don't build in the urban areas. And so take a look at this story here. This is a story about Rob Bonta, the Attorney General in the state of California, suing Huntington Beach, California. And the governor Gavin Newsom, criticizing Huntington Beach, saying that we're going to sue you because Huntington Beach, which is in an urban area, refuses to play ball, refuses to meet these arbitrary state mandates for housing construction, for dense urban housing projects. So they say, we're going to sue you because you're not building enough housing. We can debate whether that's appropriate, but that's what these politicians are doing. They're saying not enough housing means we'll sue your community. But now take a look at this story.
Now, because I like to get my sources from a primary source. Oh no, what did I do? There we go. Here's the actual article. Give me a moment because I have to share it real quick. Share.
Yeah, no problem. The housing situation is a bit sticky, but at the same time, as we've discussed, it's because infrastructure is cheaper to deliver when housing units are next to each other than it is to build an extra 600 feet of fucking underground power cable, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever else to get to the next house.
Yep. So here's the article, minus all the pictures and advertisements. California sues Huntington Beach over a housing ban. The lawsuit that California filed against Huntington Beach is another clash in the conflict between the Newsom administration and the city on housing supply. I made this PDF, highlighted some stuff because I figured that'd be quicker. Rabonta and Newsom, they allege that the city's ban on approving application for certain types of housing project is a violation of California law.
Yeah.
And it is. Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. No, okay. Huntington Beach on Thursday responded by filing a 59-page lawsuit in federal court challenging the state's requirement that the city zone for 13,368 new housing units in the coming years. The state's lawsuit focuses on a ban that Huntington Beach has established on applications for projects under Senate Bill 9, a new state housing law that makes it easier for homeowners to split their single-family lots and build a duplex on each side for a possible total of 4 units on one parcel. This is voluntary. These are people who say, I want to do this. These are developers who say, we want to do this. No one is being forced to build. People are choosing. And the city of Huntington Beach says, we don't want that, and we're not going to allow it. So yes, there's absolutely every reason that it should be challenged. Wait a second. Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying in the Huntington Beach housing saga,
yes,
that Newsom and Rabonta are suing the city of Huntington Beach because it is infringing on individual property rights to build a duplex instead of a single family home. And the city of Huntington Beach says, no, we don't want that riffraff in Huntington Beach. Yeah. You can take your fucking duplex and shove it. We do single family homes only.
Yep.
And this guy, the supposed conservative, is saying how big government's getting in the way of people's right to housing.
Right. So it turns out when you do a little bit of research, you find out there's just more bullshit. It's bullshit all the way down, folks. Bonta previously sent a letter warning of the city that the ordinance would violate the builder's remedy, a state law intending to crack down on cities that don't meaningfully plan for new housing and to provide a path forward towards a construction of more affordable units. So yeah, in the end, it is, we don't want riffraff.
Hence the duplexes or the ADUs or...
Yep. And that's basically all it is. And let's see. Now I got to get back. So yeah, any idea or any thoughts on that?
I think that it's good that the state of California is like, hey, wait a second. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you have the ability, well, you have the demand, right? Like you can look at housing prices and be like, oh shit. Or you have a lot of workers that work in Huntington Beach that can't live there because there's no housing.
Right.
So the state of California is like, we need to fix this. We're going to look at your fucking laws, and your law says you can't have anything but a single family home. And we're saying like, no, if you're in this dense area, like it can be a little denser.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a war on rural people by the state of California saying like, hey, you can't pass laws to restrict housing building.
Yeah, it's landowners saying we would like to do this, most likely for money, and the city telling them, no, you may not.
Yeah. Well, the state of California doesn't want fucking like individual people to have houses.
Right.
They want fucking landlords to be able to build more housing units so that workers can have housing, but also so that landlords can make money.
Precisely, yeah.
All right,
then
now we're talking about the San Diego Tribune.
San Diego Union Tribune.
Story from the San Diego Union Tribune. Quote, Attorney General Bonta warned San Diego about building in areas with high fire risk. Now, he's going to say high fire risk because he needs to have an excuse as to why he doesn't want the housing. What he's really saying is, don't build in rural areas.
Is that what he's
and
saying?
He even
that's not what he's saying, but I'll let him continue.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll
supports litigation that would stop housing projects in those very areas. Even though you can build in a rural community and create vegetative buffers and do a variety of things to provide it safety from catastrophic wildland fire.
So, yeah.
Oh, there.
That's
not
exactly what it says.
I mean, literally, the subtitle of that article said exactly that. It's like, no. You're not going to build housing here without taking into consideration in your EIR or your environmental impact report or whatever other documentation is necessary. You're not going to just ignore wildfire risk when you propose a development.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, there's ways of mitigating. Precisely.
And they're asking you to do it.
Just that headline says. He's like, you have to be able to mitigate against fire risk.
Yeah.
If you're going to get approved, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so here's what it actually says.
You highlighted some stuff.
I highlighted some stuff. Let's see. Oh, damn it. It goes down per page. Rob Bonta, is pointing out that a project's density, location, access to water, both for drinking and firefighting, impact on evacuation routes. If you make new places, it can make it so that there is more traffic in the event of an emergency, and it needs to be taken into account. And whether housing would be built with fire resistant materials. I don't know as much about that, but I suspect that, if you make the outside of your house a little more fire resistant, it's less likely to make it in. Seems pretty basic. He says that local government should prioritize
impact on evacuation routes. He was talking about this.
Yeah. Prioritize infill developments in urbanized areas.
I feel like we're getting laggy.
We are, yeah. We have an excellent connection now, but it's been going back and forth. Lines that cover rural landscapes.
Okay.
Leaders should avoid approving projects along steep slopes and rugged terrain while ensuring that new projects have adequate highways and roads to get residents to safety during an emergency. Not asking for much, just asking that it's safe that you make a town there. A guy who works for the Building Industry Association of San Diego County, Vice President Matthew Adams, says that master plan communities often add new fire and emergency response resources like fire stations, as well as better defined evacuation routes in parts of the state where none previously existed. All well and good, but all that Bonta is saying is that needs to be required, not something that they often add. The Attorney General's office helped the Sierra Club and other environmental groups.
He's warning.
Yeah.
He's saying, hey, y'all really need to do for rural governments, local governments, who are ultimately that's really what the local government does. It manages land use, right? That's its like main function. And that land use planning function. And all Bonta's saying, it seems, is like, you have to plan for fucking this.
Yeah.
Like, you can't ignore this. You can't just willy-nilly approve a gigantic development up a road that's not 4 lanes or wide enough to handle the number of cars you're putting up there.
Exactly.
Or alternatively, you could have the homeowners association structured to where everybody pays for their own fucking fire department.
And often in rural places they do. So, I mean, there's already a precedent for that.
Yeah. The interesting thing about development too is that like they're like, oh, it's so expensive. We have to pay all these fees. Well, they're called development fees. And what those fees do is pay for certain infrastructure like fire departments and shit. Well, those development fees that are paid will never, like, they're useful, right? But they will never cover the cost of the additional infrastructure needed for the life of that development.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
so it's just a moot point. Did you have more on this?
Just a little bit. The Attorney General's office helped the Sierra Club and other environmental groups block a project last year called Adara at the Otay Ranch. It was an 1,119 home project that was planned east of Chula Vista and south of Jamul along Proctor Valley Road in a fire-prone area. If you look at Jamul, I'm not going to pull it up, but if you look at it, you'll see that it is a nice green oasis surrounded by brown, and they wanted to build in the brown. Not a great idea. Earlier this year, the Attorney General also successfully sued to overturn Lake County's approval of the Gwinnett Valley project on the grounds that the luxury resort,
Luxury
not a city where people are living rurally, fucking resort and residential development, a clog evacuation routes during a wildfire emergency. The 16,000-acre site has burned 11 times since 1952.
11 times since 52.
11
Okay.
times.
And so when they're like, oh yeah, they're stopping rural. I guess you can read that as they're but what are they stopping? There's not stopping development for fucking regular people. They're stopping luxury development that's just going to be people from San Francisco's vacation houses. And if they just happen to be at their vacation house when a wildfire comes, Lake County's poor as fuck, bro. It's not the poorest county in the state, but it is poor, right? It probably has a worse meth problem than fucking Butte County, I'm sure.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, it's Lake County's fucking, they're kind of, pretty poor, man. Especially being surrounded by all, like, being right next to, like, you drop out of Lake County, out of, like, Middletown, and you're into fucking wine country, bro. It's, like, night and day in terms of, like, the economic disparity between those two places.
Yeah, Jamul, that city that is mentioned, has vineyards.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so basically what they're saying is that you're going to build this big thing, and it's going to be nice for people who want a vacation. You build a private lake, and you do all that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But then, like, you're not paying to widen a highway or to expand fire services and hire more firefighters and build a new station and buy new engines. Like, you're not doing so. And maybe they would at a 16,000-acre site. They might be required to have like a small fire department in-house. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's an area where, like, you can't really justify building more roads. Or maybe you could justify it, but maybe not. I don't know. But either way, like, that is a factor. And if you didn't plan on fucking, widening all the, like, 50 miles of fucking highway to help these guys get out, then you can't build your shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
right. Carry on.
Yep.
I think that's it.
Oh,
no, there is something else.
Yeah, I need to share. Sorry, I messed up.
You're good.
Screen share, California. Why is it not working? What is happening? Close settings. Share screen.
Yeah, we're pretty much done, right? He's got one more
there
argument.
We go. Yeah.
Going on here. Cool. And that is, there is actually a philosophy that we're up against on the far left. Their view is that if you live in the dense urban areas, that's good for society. What it means is that people don't need highways. They don't need cars. They can walk, bike, and take transit because they all live in the same area.
Yeah, because there's no fucking highways in LA County or San Diego County. Absolutely none. Everyone walks and bikes and takes, little Ubers and electric, cars to work. It truly is a paradise.
They also think that it's wasteful to have large properties, large houses, that you really should be living in the tiny house or an apartment building.
I don't think
anyone said that anywhere.
No, I don't think they're saying that at all. I think what they're saying is maybe, we could turn some 1-acre plots into like 8 duplexes or something like that. Like duplexes
in cities.
Are still nice. Yeah, in cities. And duplexes
Which is
are
funny,
still pretty nice.
He brought that up when it's like the whole fucking argument, the whole video is that there's a war on rural California.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about how stupid fucking state is for banning or for suing people for fighting housing density.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not coherent. But yeah. You take a 1-acre plot, you put like 8 duplexes on it, connect them by the garage or whatever. You're good. It's a lot of housing there.
Yeah, 100%. Let's listen to his fucking.
Their concept is that
ideology-driven
government gets to
parent
plan
tiger.
communities. That it's all coordinated, it's all efficient. In fact, the regional transportation agency chief in San Diego,
Ooh, tell me.
his name is Hassan Akrada.
That sounds foreign.
He actually was trained in the Soviet Union. No joke. He was trained in the Soviet Union. He grew up in the Soviet Union. He worked for the Moscow Transportation and Planning Agency. Came to the United States. He's now the head of SANDAG, which does a lot of this evaluation of regional housing, regional transportation. He expresses this far left-wing philosophy. He was on an interview recently, and he said, he said this. Listen in.
In a great nation like ours, you can't let people do what they want. It has to be coordinated.
You can't.
And so, yeah, he chops that up. And so I looked for the original source, and it's a guy interviewing him and saying, like, shouldn't we just let the market determine if suburbs are going to die? If they're not something that people want, they should die naturally. And he replies, like, no, you can't really trust people to do that. Because as we've seen, people move to suburbs, move to rural areas, and then bitch that they don't have anything.
They complain that they take their commutes too long.
Yeah. And so, like, you kind of sometimes need to tell people what's good for them. And the fact that he attacks him and he says he's Russian, he worked for the Moscow people, and it's like, yeah, a lot of people worked for not great places, and then they found a better life here, and now they're like full on the American dream and shit.
It's funny he's calling it far left too, to say like any coordination. Do you want to see what uncoordinated looks like? Look at much of the country. It looks like shitty strip malls surrounded by aging pavement, right? That's chunks are getting knocked out of, right? That is uncoordinated. Coordinated is what Miriam Park is, which as much as it's not my thing, they're certainly delivering a lot more fucking housing units per dollar spent on infrastructure. Right?
Yeah.
Because they have to run less sewer line, they have to run less electrical line, they have to run less water line, they have to pave less fucking road surface.
It is a more efficient use of the limited resources that we have on the planet.
Right. And so I absolutely believe in planning. I think that we could have democratic planning. The problem is that all these planning institutions are controlled by fucking developers whose sole purpose is to make short-term profit. And that's the other thing too, right? Like the interviewer asked, well, can't the market do it? And the guy responds, well, no, it needs to be a little more coordinated than that. And you had mentioned like we should have government thinking for people. And I'd rather phrase it as I think it's really important that the market is short-sighted. It is focused on how to extract profit right now.
Yeah.
When we do things like make investments of tens of billions or trillions and trillions of dollars in resources and labor and time and use of lands, like permanent fucking destruction of land for development, I think that we need to step back and say, no, the market is too short-sighted to do this right.
Yeah.
And that we need to be a little coordinated or have a little planning.
And it is a fair complaint. It is absolutely fair and correct that they're going to worry about their quarterly profits in an area that needs to last, ideally, hundreds of years. I mean, who knows if that's ever true.
I mean, I was just thinking the other day of like they built the airport in Newcastle, Delaware. I don't know why I was thinking of Delaware the other day.
Stuck on Delaware.
But like they built the we were talking about cockroaches, and a friend of mine that lived there, like he had neighbors next door that were fucking really dirty, and he had a bad cockroach problem. I think that was why it came up. But I'm just thinking of that. And they had the airport, and then they had in World War II, they had all the base housing, right, which is just shoddily constructed, like little single family homes, but on tiny lots,
right?
And a whole lot of them all packed together in these like little blocks. And then some projects that were built like a little later in the 60s and 70s on the other side of the highway, but just a fucking massive, inhospitable sprawl that you can't people are fucking forced to pay thousands of dollars a year for transportation instead of being able, like, because they live in a fucking environment not built for pedestrians.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's ugly. I think James Howard Kunstler calls it the greatest misallocation of resources in human history, the suburban project. Right. And that was largely driven by unplanned. You can see it in a city like Chico. You can see what it looked like when they actually planned and had a grand master plan, because downtown Chico is fucking coherent. They subdivided it out, and then they let private businesses do it. They had some regulations on how you could construct your building so that it felt like a coherent unit, right?
Right.
You go outside of the city limits, and it's just fucking strip malls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's his argument's really absurd, and he really tries, I think, way too hard to check all the fucking right-wing boxes.
That is,
okay, I dug on environmentalists and I called someone far left. I'm surprised he didn't roll out woke somewhere, right? Like,
hey, he's still got 2 minutes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I say he's still got 2 minutes. You never know.
Oh, we're gonna keep rolling? All right.
Yeah, there's only a little bit left.
Trust the people. It has to be coordinated. How offensive, how arrogant, but it very much reflects the philosophy of the left that you shouldn't be allowed private property rights. You shouldn't be able to build a home or a community where you would like. That government should restrict and only allow you to be building in the urban, dense areas.
Government is always controlled.
Another benefit.
Build.
Yeah. And I say that if you want to build out there, you get to pay for fucking everything. You get to pay for your water. You get to pay for your firefighting. Pay for everything on your own, because you're trying to get away from society. You're trying to leave civilization and live off on your own and do your own thing. Cool. Do it on your own then.
And or you're trying to make a bunch of money by having this niche kind of luxury resort in fucking Tweakerville, right?
Yeah.
This gated fucking luxury resort in Tweakerville.
Oh yeah.
And then you're like, oh, by the way, we don't want to fucking pay for a new firehouse. We don't want to pay to widen the roads.
You need to pay for our police department, which we'll inevitably need to keep the tweakers out. Yeah.
And realistically, most of Lake County, there's like no way, like the whole north of it, there is no way to go north because it's all unimproved roads, logging roads and shit in the Mendocino National Forest, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Highway 20. You can go east towards the valley or west towards Mendocino County, right towards the Redwood Coast. Or you can go south, which is through mountains. All directions are through mountains, by the way, which are also incredibly fire prone. And if you go south, you drop out into the wine country, which we just had a bunch of fires that burned through there this last year. I think there was a minor fire that took out some houses. I mean, it was still scary and a big deal, but like it wasn't as destructive as the Tubbs fire, which we mentioned earlier, that burned 10,000 homes and burned up through parts of the Napa Valley.
Yep.
And surrounding hills. So like there's not really a way to go to evacuate, period, anyway.
Yeah.
And so I block that shit. We don't need more fucking luxury developments in Tweakerville.
Yeah.
What we need is fucking affordable housing where people live and work.
Yeah.
And like he says, oh, they want to take this away from you. They don't trust you to be able to do your own thing, and they don't trust you with freedom. It's like, I think I gave a pretty cogent argument, pretty coherent argument as to why I think the coordination and planning is better than the short-sightedness of the market. Yeah. When it comes to making massive investments in the way we construct how we live. Because you can't just change it.
Yeah.
Like there are all sorts of people that like there's a whole movement called transition towns, and it never got gravity because the more work you do, the more you realize you can't really transition what we built into something post oil.
Yeah.
Like we can't take something built by oil and make it conform to a world without oil, which is the fucking reality. And that's the reality now. And it's going to be the reality more. And that's why fucking the U.S. has got a fucking carrier group in the Mediterranean because the Grand Master Plan 20 years from now is to seize the Saudi oil fields. No doubt. Yeah. It's about fucking controlling those resources so that people like him and people that think like him can continue to believe that we can fucking just build a luxury housing development in the middle of fucking nowhere, 50 miles from where you work, and that the public is going to subsidize your fucking commute. And we're going to subsidize the gas that goes in your tank by paying fucking 65 cents on every dollar to the goddamn military.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking absurd.
It is.
There's
It
so
gets
many
more
nth
absurd.
order effects. There is no way to say what is freedom or not, because fucking government is involved in propping up the same system he's saying government is fighting. It's fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Little more.
Fit to the leftists for trying to stop suburban and rural development. And that is, they believe that if you're in the urban core, that it actually makes you think more like a liberal. And you've seen these dense housing projects placed in different communities, and we've seen those communities then shift their voting patterns as a result. Government subsidized projects, affordable housing projects, welfare projects all seem to shift voting patterns.
It's almost as if, and correct me if you think this is wrong, almost as if you move to a big city, you used to think that cities were bad. You get a whole lot of benefits from your tax dollars. You get public support programs, safety nets, and things like that. It's almost as if you get those things and you want to keep the government that's providing you with those things around, and you want to vote for the people that are giving you those benefits. It seems a little crazy, but I think that might be what's going on.
There's an element of it too that's when you see more like different people and you have to live and conduct your life with people that are not like you and that come from different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
It automatically like tempers the like natural xenophobe in everybody.
Yeah, and that is scientifically proven. There's been research.
Like, interestingly enough, Anaheim is a fairly dense city, fairly close to a city that he probably lives in, San Diego, and both of those cities are very conservative, and Anaheim is the goddamn rebirth place of the fucking KKK.
And Disney.
That's a city. And the home of Disney.
Yeah.
But that's not related. I think Disney wasn't... I mean, it certainly affected it, but I think Disney chose it there because the land was available.
Yeah, that's true.
And so my point is that like I live in Chico, a city of 100,000 people. 6 out of 7 people on our city council are conservatives. 2 of them are like really, really like fucking like Freedom Caucus-esque kind of like far right proto
Handmaid's Tale. Yeah.
Yeah, Handmaid's Tale bullshit, like evangelical fucking crazy bastards. And the other ones are just shrewd fucking business owners that want to enrich themselves. And one of them's a fucking developer.
Makes sense.
Right. And then you have the one kid who's kind of like an idealistic young guy. Because actually, I think the youngest person to serve on the council is the one liberal.
Shit.
But my point being is that like communities across the country, in fact, I think conservatives control more state houses than liberals.
Yeah.
And I would go so far as to say conservatives control more city councils nationwide than liberals. But somehow California is trying to force people in to be next to each other for some kind of ideological purpose, which seems really fucking silly. And it really seems like if we really wanted to like affect your ideology, there's a lot easier ways to do it. We can control what you see on the fucking internet because other countries do that shit.
Yeah.
Like where they're like, no, we don't like homosexuality in our fucking country. So we're just literally ban anything adjacent to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we wanted to, if there was someone that wanted to control the way people are thinking, we're certainly not going to do it by like fucking,
encouraging you to move to a city.
Start, you need to start reporting how much water you draw from this well. You give it to this agency that's also controlled by people like you who don't want to say how much water you're using because you're all competing with each other to like maximize your fucking harvest and therefore your profit, right? Like those systems, those structures are put in place as like window dressing. Industrial civilization will never, ever, ever be tempered by fucking well-meaning individuals. Industrial civilization will only be tempered by its own fucking internal contradictions. And only then after lots of
suffering.
Yeah, lots of suffering.
Yep,
so you want to roll that music or we got a little more on this?
A little tiny bit more.
Okay. We know that when California votes, and we actually have a little map here of voting in counties. Look at all the red in California. Now, overall, California is a very deep blue state because all those dense urban areas that are blue have a lot more people in them. But you go out to the rural areas, Yep. Red. Conservative. And so don't for a moment.
I think that might have
How
something to do.
profound.
I think that might have something to do with the fact that, like when your needs are ignored, you start to feel persecuted, and the mental tactics of the right demand that you feel persecuted in order to believe them. I don't think it's any mistake. I don't think.
Well, I think there's a moral righteousness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of moral righteousness to it, right? Like we have conservative values. We value hard work, not like all them welfare queens in the city,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, God.
There's a kind of sense of superiority to it, and like, dude, fucking people are people, man. Everybody wants their fucking kids to do good, right? Everybody wants to like not live in fear of fucking imminent nuclear war, like we call
Being gunned down by the
similar.
local warlord. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Get shook down by your local warlords, whatever. But that kind of like, and see, so they want us to be dense so that we're Democrats, and that the divide is, yes, part cultural, but it's part economic, right? And it's part just general cultural. Like people in the cities are coming from lots of places, especially in California, where we have a lot of fucking migration, right? Generally, they're not moving into Podunk Nowhere. The people who live in Podunk Nowhere are the people whose great-great-grandpappy fucking shot Indians for it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and the new rich that can afford it.
That's just the way it is, bro.
Yep. Very little left.
Yeah, and the new rich who can afford to push through their luxury developments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In fire-prone areas.
Not some political motivation behind punishing rural communities, limiting growth in rural areas, and trying to force people by hook or crook to move into dense urban areas. It's a common thread through all these policies: housing, water, energy, transportation, insurance. Some would say there's a war against rural communities. And if you look to California, you'll see the evidence of that war.
After that, he tells you that you can fight all this by liking and subscribing and ringing the bell, so we won't watch that. But yeah.
I just thought his conclusion was horseshit, and I think in all 5 things that he discussed, like, we're all kind of like, well, there's kind of a lot more to it than you're letting on, and you kind of really simplified it. And I guess he wanted to have like a tight narrative, but like it's almost as if he had started with a conclusion and then went backwards and ignored all the places where the evidence said your conclusion is wrong.
Yeah.
And only cherry picked the evidence that said his conclusion was right. And I don't even think he did a good job at that. What do you think?
Obviously not, because we've been almost 2 hours about it. I thought it was going to be an hour. I was sure of it.
I was sure of it too.
But
I don't know. Let's roll that music.
Now we can play that funky music.
All right, everybody. Well, I think let's all calm down. Like your government is not at war with you. Like, I do think that there's a lot of disconnect. I think there's a fuck ton of corruption. I certainly don't think that if you feel like the government is not serving your interests, you are 100% correct, and that is a valid way to feel.
Yes.
I do not think that there is some cabal of hand-wringing, old white men or whatever in an office, or let's even make it like of black women, some cabal of black women rubbing their hands together, thinking of ways to fuck over people who live in the country. It's a demographic reality, which we didn't even mention today. I guess I'll mention it to his final point that like there's somehow this push to put people in the cities to somehow rewire their brains for being liberals, which is fucking weird, right?
It does always seem to be a big concern of people on the right, is that we're brainwashing people, we're indoctrinating them, and it's like,
and the internet has done more.
Mm-hmm.
The internet has done more to shift cultural attitudes and politics in rural areas than anything else. All those red areas, if you looked at it, guarantee their average age is at least 10, 15, possibly even 20 or more years higher than the blue areas. That's part of it too, just generational change, right? And young people don't stay in those places because there's no jobs
Precisely.
in
Yeah.
those places.
Like, no one's being pushed out of rural areas. They're being pulled to suburban areas and urban centers by the jobs.
100%.
Yeah, nothing else but that. That's the simplest explanation, so it's probably true.
Exactly. And I think this guy kind of really grasps straws trying to fucking prove his narrative that, like, not only there's a war on rural California, but also that the objective in that war, the strategic objective, is to brainwash us all by, making us vote for fucking Democrats or something. It's really kind of absurd, and it's hidden behind this facade of, like, respectability. And this whole, conservatives love this shit. People like Ben Shapiro, facts and logic, when it's like, it actually doesn't take that much effort to, like, break down through what you're saying and kind of pick it apart philosophically, just as we did today. Do you have a final thought?
I don't listen to people like this who don't provide you with facts, and if they try to get you to think a certain way without giving you facts, look it up yourself. It's not hard.
Yeah, and I think my big suggestion to folks is, like, don't get caught up in these kind of really emotionally driven responses, because that's what it's trying to provoke.
Yeah, but I was going to mention
Like,
that.
if you live in rural California, you are under assault right now. You better fucking grab your rifle and be ready to fucking kill some darkies, right?
Yeah, it's a war against you.
Or whatever, kill some fucking trans kids or whatever it is, right? Like, that it's intended to provoke an emotional response, right?
Mhm.
At least that's how I'm perceiving it.
Oh yeah, it is meant to make it hard for you to do the work of analyzing it critically, saying to yourself, hey, that guy didn't provide any sort of evidence for that statement. He didn't even say, like, in the case of so and so versus so and so, or in this town this happened. A lot of it just sounds purely anecdotal. Like, honestly, with no real names, numbers, cities, or anything like that, it all just seems like pure anecdote. Don't believe anecdotes. They're the worst kind of evidence.
I mean, we responded with lots of anecdotes, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I also think another part of that is that, like, yes, politicians serve their own interests and not the general public.
Mm.
I think, generally speaking, most try, right, to balance that and try and do what benefits them and more people.
Yeah.
I think the bureaucrats mean well, but they're also self-interested in keeping their jobs. But not any fucking bureaucrat. I challenge anybody to find a bureaucrat in the state of California that's like, when I go to work every day, I love my job because I'm trying to screw over people I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't say that because that's not how fucking people operate.
No, not at all.
This is the kind of attitude, this stuff that he fucking brings up, where he tries to make people afraid of other people. So now people who are, quote, left wing, even though I literally gave, like, good cases for fucking economic planning and why we should maybe consider it and maybe approach it democratically, not fucking big D democratically, like blue state fucking one party rule bullshit in California, but I mean lowercase d democratic. Like, let's maybe have a conversation about how we want to plan it, instead of making assumptions about what we think about urban planning and land use, right? Maybe let's have a fucking conversation and make some decisions. And remember, folks, we're at each other's throats because this is part of a broader pattern, because when liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause!
Thank you, my friend.
Baby.
I'll see you later.
Fucking Yoda. Now.